The thing about movies is that it's all about directors trying to capture moments. And what you're required to do as an actor is just to show up and let your defenses down. And if you do that, then things happen that you're not really aware of. And the director has to be, sharp enough and prepared enough to know which of those things to grab onto.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
We're catching Alessandro Nivola at a very interesting moment in his career. A day before this conversation, he was awarded the British Independent Film Award for Best Supporting Actor for his work in Disobedience. And a few days before that, it was announced that he's going to star in David Chase's Sopranos prequel, The Many Saints of Newark. So in the midst of this very happy news, I sat down with him in his home in Brooklyn to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical first step that you take to get your arms around a role?
It's funny. I don't really think I do have any kind of template for how I go about it from one job to the next. I was just talking last night. My son is among other things interested in filmmaking and acting and all that kind of thing, and he's been doing the school plays, and he wants to go to a drama school this summer, and we're trying to kind of help him find the right place. And then I gave him a bunch of different books. There were 3 books that I read that I remember being kind of the seminal books that I'd read growing up. Actually 4. One was the Stella Adler book. One was the Uta Hagen book, Respect for Acting, and one was the Sanford Meisner book. And then there's Zen and the Art of Archery or whatever. And I've read all those things back to back many times, and I'd taken all these different classes, and I was talking to him last night, and he was just reading through the Meisner one to start with, and there was something in the Meisner one that said at the beginning, everybody is different, and everybody's going to have a different way of going about learning how to be an actor and then being an actor. And so really my getting up here now and telling you how to do it, it goes against everything I believe. And then he goes on to give like a brilliant master class in how to do it his way for the next 150 pages. But the upshot of the conversation was just like, I just remembered the feeling that I didn't really have a particular technique or whatever, and it was defined so much more by what the particular role was, who the director was, what the world of the film was, and what that would require. And so certain types of roles have just been, I don't know, just like immediately starting to listen to certain kind of music, or others have been, reading up on a certain part of history. Others have been, wearing a certain kind of clothes. In any case, really just from the minute that I get offered the job, your brain, it just starts to be on your mind at all times of the day, morning, noon, and night, just total obsession. And it's like a kind of, it's a really good kind of feeling. It's like your little companion through your day. And when you don't have that thing to occupy your whirring mind, that's the hardest thing about being out of work as an actor, is just that you don't have that focus for all of your restless energy and anxiety and desire and hope and fear and everything. And when you do, everything just gets like hyper focused, into one thing, and it just like, I don't know, it makes your heart slow down. And one thing I do know is the more time you have, the better. Up until really recently, I've just hardly ever had any time at all. I usually get cast like a week before the thing starts because some other guy dropped out, and Disobedience, I think, was the first job in a long time that I was offered where I had 4 months or something, 4 months, I think, before we were going to start. And there was really no way in that particular job that I could ever have even thought about going to work without having had that time in this case, just because there was so many behavioral and vocal and ritual things that I had to familiarize myself with in a way that would feel second nature, that there was just no way to learn overnight. And then I had to grow an enormous beard, which definitely wasn't gonna grow in 2 weeks. So I was lucky enough to get introduced to a guy, this Orthodox guy, Lubavitch guy living in Crown Heights right over there. And he had initially taken me under his wing as a kind of mentor figure to, I think first of all, he was just very concerned that I was going to fuck this up and that I was going to misrepresent the community in a way that was going to be upsetting to them and to him. And then maybe there's a little bit of like attraction to the glamour and of the movies. But he...
did you know what the subject matter was?
He did. I gave him the script.
Yeah, wow.
And from his point of view, he just thought it was a fascinating story, and he just completely understood my character and how my character felt and what a dilemma it must have been for my character. And so he was like really curious to want to talk about it. But it started really with technical stuff, which was vocal. It started with Hebrew, and he started tutoring me in how to say these Hebrew blessings that I had to say. You say one in the morning. There's the Moedeani and Lefanecha Malacha Vikayim.
Yeah, if you don't get that right, that is a big sign to everybody that knows that stuff.
Yeah, and there's a very particular. Yeah. Although interestingly, almost everybody I met said it differently and thought that the other guys were saying it wrong, and no, you listen to him. What are you? And but then and then he started inviting me to have dinner with his family, and we became really close, and that was kind of my way in. But I guess if I had to say the one thing that I do tend to always be thinking about from the very, very beginning is the voice. I've done a lot of accent work in the roles I've played, partly because I've played a lot of English characters or British characters, and but I've always found it to be a great way into character, because the way that you talk and just the way that you sort of the sound of your voice and the sound of words, the way that you make your words and everything really changes the way that your whole physicality is, and your body and your face and the way you hold yourself and all that kind of thing. And it happens kind of naturally, it's not something that you have to force on it. Yeah. If you're just starting to hear the sounds, and if you can start to imitate the sounds, it infects your whole body. Yeah. And so I don't see it so much as just a technical thing as a kind of a whole body and soul thing that comes out of this one little focal point. I remember as a kid, my dad was really good at doing impersonations. And he would always at dinner like make us all laugh and stuff by imitating family, friends, and people we knew and stuff. And he was always really good at it. And I definitely think there's some part of that's like the basis of acting for me in general, is just that, like, remembering those images of my dad kind of entertaining everybody at the table by like being able to conjure up friends of ours just from his like talent for imitating the way they talked, and and so that's become a big part of it, and the fact that I like have a good ear for that stuff has really like changed the course of my career in a big way, and opened things up to possibilities to play people that I never imagined that I could have. I mean, I didn't think I was going to have a career in England at all. And it was just it kind of happened by accident. But I was because I was able to be convincing vocally, I think is really what made that whole thing possible.
Take me through like preparation mode for Disobedience.
I watched this movie again last night. If you don't land this speech in the end, the whole movie doesn't work.
Yeah.
Did you realize that at some point? Do you agree with that, or did you see that in the script? Were you worried about the scene?
I always felt that the scene in the synagogue was the climax of the film, and that it was kind of like a bold and strange move for the director and the writers to have that character suddenly like take center stage at that moment in the movie.
Yeah.
But I felt a huge a huge sense of responsibility about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I knew that was the day that I had to deliver, and I really cared about it. I felt emotionally connected to it. Look, this movie was shot. My dad was dying when we were filming this movie, and he had. He was like dying fast, and I was told the first week of filming that he had 3 months to live, and so he could have died before I finished filming the movie. And then there was this whole kind of like, discussion with the producers about like what would happen if he died, and they these poor producers, I really feel for them like as much as I felt for myself, that they like had to kind of try and explain to me that their bond wouldn't like allow for me to sort of adequately mourn my dad for however many weeks or whatever, if he were to die in the middle of the shoot. And they had to like break that news to me so that I could make a decision about whether to stay in the film or not in a sort of way that I had all the facts, and so then I had to talk to my dad about it and tell him that I was going to be able to like if I got the word that he was like going out, that I could come home for maybe 48 hours or something, and he just was vehement about telling me that I couldn't quit the movie, and he'd been, we'd been talking about it just for the past 3 months prior, even before he'd gotten this kind of death sentence, and so he knew, he was as invested in the whole thing as I was, and I think just like the notion of me coming home and just kind of sitting vigil by his bedside and kind of waiting for him to die really turned his stomach, and he couldn't really handle that. And so he told me that he just would be so depressed if I bailed. And so the experience of making the movie was just like super intense because of that. And I was coming to work every day feeling like that if I wasted any moment of any day of the opportunity that I had, and of the experience, and of the commitment to portraying this guy, and if I frittered anything away with fear or insecurity or laziness or distraction or whatever, that it was an insult to my dad. That was basically how I was feeling every day. So I came in like on a mission from the start, and I that scene is all like the movie, the framework of the movie, the backdrop of the movie is all about a guy whose sort of father figure has just died.
Right.
And so sometimes it happens that way, where art and life are mirroring each other. And so that scene was, the whole shoot was very like, I was very charged up emotionally, and it didn't take much for me to access those things in this particular case, just because, a combination of that happening in my real life, and then just being at the age that I am, where I don't know, those things, just the life and death are suddenly so tangible and real, and not as far away as they were as a really young man,
So you're in there with this going on with you, and that you're able to use it in a way, like they say. But it seems like your other two co-stars were also somehow really, really invested in this in a way. Is this the director? Is this just people loving this material? Can you just take me through what was making this special?
I think each person was coming at it from a different point of view. Rachel Weisz, this was a movie about the kind of community that she grew up in the fringes of. Her dad is an Orthodox Jew, and she had grown up right near that neighborhood, and so it really was personal to her in that way. And she was the one who had read the book and loved the book, and found the material and brought the material to Frida Torres Blanco and Ed Guinea, and then kind of developed it from its inception. And she was the one who found Sebastian along with them. And so for her it was something about some kind of homage to her childhood, while also like being like fiercely invested in the future, and in finding great roles for women, and bringing progressive values into the world. And so it was kind of a marriage of those different things. For Rachel McAdams, I think she's just, I'd say, like, if I had to have one word to describe her, it's game. She's just so open and curious and willing to dive in without hesitation or skepticism or resistance or fear so she I think she just saw an opportunity like I did, which was to play a role that was really, really far from herself, and to see how believable she could be.
Right.
And in the early days of the kind of research that we were doing and preparation we were doing, we were kind of having, symmetrical experience, where she was in LA, I was here, but we were both doing the same thing, going and visiting these families and really finding our way into these Orthodox communities, and just trying to like be a sponge and just totally attuned to every little detail of all the different types of characters that we encountered, and trying to imagine, who in these communities would be the closest person to the best equivalent to the people that we were playing, and what could we draw from one person. It was interesting. Like somebody asked me in a Q&A in London just last week, because the movie just opened in England this weekend, and so we've just been doing all this press over there after 6 months after it opened here. and somebody, we did some screenings up in that neighborhood, and somebody asked me, like, how did I feel like I was going into those communities and taking what I could from the experience of being there and using it for my own purposes, and then moving on, and do I feel in any way kind of sheepish about that, or and it was such an interesting question, because there is some part of the whole process that is like, I mean, in the way of like a journalist, I guess, where you are you encounter people, and you're for this brief period of time, you're so engaged with them, and you're so curious, and you're so hungry for information and for anything that you can kind of glean from your encounter with them, and then you go off and you make this movie, and then you go off to the back to your life somehow, and the people that you've met just are kind of left behind. But for me, like, I don't know, every time I've had an opportunity like this, I've ended up making kind of lifelong friends with people that I've met, and to me, the experience of doing this work as an actor, and on the one hand, and then just kind of being a person alive in the world on the other, are kind of inseparable, and that it's part of the thrill of being an actor is actually getting being able to have access to people that I wouldn't otherwise, or to learn about other people's way of living. And sometimes you're being asked to play somebody who has a way of living that's really as different as your own as you could imagine, and this was one of those. But so I think Rachel McAdams felt the same way, and so we were talking a lot in those early days, and she was we were just like sharing information, and said, what did you learn today? What did you learn today? And also then there was, again, it was this vocal thing, and like how we had to sound like we were from the same place, and feel that we'd kind of grown up together in the same place, and trying to compare notes about that too.
Right. How did Sebastian Lelio help you, specifically, like as a director, and use that as a way to talk to me about what you need from a director in general?
Well, first of all, he really loves actors, and he gets really turned on by seeing actors perform, and it kind of, and you feel that while you're there, that like you're thrilling him somehow, and that somehow he's like intensely focused on you, and that he's getting ideas from what you're doing and what you're giving him, and that he's appreciating your like openness and your vulnerability and your spontaneity and your like creative hunger and everything, and that's like, that he could ask for nothing more. And then as far as like on an intellectual level, he just it's kind of spare, like just little nudges here and there where he would, and this is answering both your questions. I mean, my favorite way to be directed is like that, is just like being made to feel that whatever I was doing was fascinating on the one hand, and then like and that if I didn't have it right, if it wasn't working or whatever, that he could just like you know how in outer space, like a thing is just sort of moving in one direction, and if you just like tap it a little bit, it moves in another direction. That's how you want to feel.
Oh, that's a nice image. In that speech, in Disobedience,
Yeah.
that I claim is so important, you let out this breath right before you say, "You're free." Do you know what I'm talking about?
You know, I haven't seen the movie in like 2 years.
I want to tell the audience that you're looking away
Yeah.
when I said that,
Yeah.
as if you don't know what I'm talking about. And I love that. I love that because I think that breath is so important. But like, I'm glad you don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, look, the thing about movies is that it's all about directors trying to capture moments. And what you're required to do as an actor is just to show up and let your defenses down. And if you do that, then things happen that you're not really aware of. And that's what the director has to be, sharp enough and prepared enough to know which of those things to grab onto. So that scene, I shot that scene a bunch of times because they shot it with different camera angles, and they shot it in close up, and they shot it a million miles away, and they shot it with a long lens, and they shot it with different lenses. And so I probably said that speech 25 times or something.
Is that right?
Wow. The luxury of that. Look, the
was it in front of all those people every time?
No. There were always the people right in front of me.
Okay.
But the
people on
we
the
shot
side.
it over 2 days.
Oh wow.
And so they probably couldn't afford to have all the extras filling the sides of the synagogue where they weren't going to be in frame and everything. So, but I had the guys right in front of me, and I had the two women up top there, up in the balcony. Sometimes if the scary thing about having to do it again and again and again like that is that it's an emotional speech. It's a delicate speech. You don't want to kind of grind it into the ground and then lose touch with what it was when you first read it that made you cry, or that just struck something in you that made you connect with it. And that can happen where if you're just saying something again and again and again, suddenly you just feel dead inside, and you just feel lifeless and totally disconnected from the thing, and you can't get back to that original feeling and thought you had when you first read it, and it just made total sense to you. And but the upside is that you get to the feeling of experimentation, and that you can. I mean, one thing that, and this was weirdly Kenneth Branagh, who I got this from, and I think most good actors will probably say the same. But I met Emily, my wife, Emily Mortimer, on a movie that he directed, which was this filmed adaptation of the Shakespeare play Love's Labour is Lost. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I noticed about him more than anything was that he would do it differently every single take, even if it was good. Mm. Even if it was working great. Mm. He would change the rhythms of it and change it, and sometimes it would be worse the next time. Yeah. But it was but it never got into a kind of stale feelingless or rote way of saying it. It was always new. Yeah. And I've kind of ever since then been pretty vigilant about following that rule. Mm-hmm. That I try and change it every single time I do it, and even if I'm doing it, like, even if I'm forcing it to be different, even if I'm insisting on it being different, and even if it was good the time before and it's not as good this time because I changed it, it's still worth it overall. The aggregate value of insisting on doing it different every time is worth it. And the feeling of of avoiding that kind of like dropping into the repetition and imitating yourself. You start to imitate yourself otherwise. So this was this thing. I just did it 25 different ways, and he picked the parts that he liked. And that's the director's job, and you have no control over it, and you gotta like hand it over to him that way, which is like in my early days as an actor, I really butted heads with directors a lot because I just couldn't spare that lack of control.
Yeah.
And later on, I just came to understand how much a film belongs to a director completely. And I started choosing all my roles just based on who was directing it. And, a few years ago, maybe 6 years ago, I really kind of changed my strategy as a professional or whatever, where I just started going like, I'll just do anything for somebody who is a proven, proven to be one of the kind of special ones. I really like gave myself over to that, and it made a big difference. I stopped trying to control the process at all. And the only other big thing that affected my career was the technology that allowed you to put yourself on tape and send it to people.
Tell me why that changed things for you.
Because I couldn't audition. I was too scared, and I stopped auditioning for about 10 years.
Wow.
And I didn't do any roles that weren't just offered to me.
Because of the room being
Yeah,
in
it just
the room?
was like I couldn't bear the anxiety of sitting in the waiting room with other people and having to go in there and like make small talk and then give an audition. I couldn't do it, and I was trying and I kept having such like panic attack experiences doing it that I finally just said, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. If they want to offer me the job, I've done enough work. If they want to offer me the job, tell them to offer me the job, and if not, then. And as a result, I didn't compete for a big chunk of time for any of the kind of best roles,
Yeah.
And I just did what came to me. And then this, I don't know, this is probably 8 years ago or something, where it started that you could kind of digitally do it yourself and then put it on your computer and then send it off in an email or whatever. And the minute that happened, everything started to change because I started getting back in the game. And now, I'm going to do this this Warner Brothers movie that David Chase has written as a kind of prequel to the Sopranos series. Oh, wow. And he's offered me the lead role in that just 2 weeks ago. And
Are you making news here? Has this been announced?
It was announced last week, yeah.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not up on that.
I don't even think they wanted it to be announced, and then somebody leaked it, and so it was a kind of big, mess. But the cat's out of the bag now, and it's it's probably the biggest sort of role I've ever been offered in my career to date.
That's awesome.
And I have now 5 months to prepare for it, and we shoot in April, and it's here in New York, and so it's just like.
So you're excited about this? I mean, getting your teeth into this.
Yeah. So I'll just give you an example. The first thing I did was I bought this book called Made Men, which is it's a book about the family, the DeCavalcante family that was. The family that the Sopranos were based on. It was the only New Jersey crime family that kind of rivaled the other big five, the Gaudis and the Bonanos and all the other big families that were based out of Manhattan and Queens and Brooklyn. And they kind of stepped into the void that was left by those other families when one by one they'd all been kind of rounded up by the FBI in 20 years ago or so. And anyway, so I just, the beauty is now there's so much time, which is just like you just can't buy. And so that I've been reading, and then I was I love looking at pictures, and I wrote first of all I ran into David. So my next door neighbor is Tim Van Patten. He lives right through that brick wall there, and he directed half the Sopranos. David's one of his oldest friends, and I went over there for Thanksgiving, and David was there. I hadn't been warned, and it was like a mob hit, there he was waiting for me. And so, shit, can I take you outside? You know what I mean? And so we had, got to talking, and at the end of it, I was saying, hey, so I was imagining that we were gonna spend these next 4 months just like driving around Newark and visiting all of the guys that he'd grown up with and the people that he knows and everything. And so I said, how about we, why don't you take me around, and are you still like, you must still know everybody there and stuff? And he was like, no, I don't know anybody. I was like, well, what? He was like, I don't even live, I live out, I didn't even grow up in Newark. I grew up in the suburbs. So you don't know anybody? Like, is there anybody you could introduce me to? No, I don't know anybody. So I'm on my own. Listen, I mean, this thing was such there's so many elements to this job that like that bring my career and my life full circle in some way. And to begin with, just my name, right? Yeah. Like my dad is an Italian immigrant. He goes to American schools, learns English in school, ends up wanting desperately to be an American guy and not be a WAP, changes his name from Pietro Salvatore Nivola to Pete. And he goes through school as Pete Nivola. And then he, at a certain point, eventually, probably around the time that I was born, realizes, wait a minute, he marries an American girl, my mom, Virginia Davis. And at a certain point realizes, wait a minute, there's this whole sort of part of my heritage that I've been running away from, and I got to get back closer to it, and names his first son Alessandro. And I'm like, thanks a lot, give me a name nobody can pronounce, and I'm gonna have to repeat 15 times every time I meet somebody. And so I grew up having nobody be able to pronounce my name, having people, and in the early stages of my career as an actor, having people be endlessly confused about where I was from, because I'd done these English parts a lot, and I had this European name, and people could not put it together. And this was the first time where what I was called definitely got me a job. And it just was so satisfying, like this handicap had suddenly been turned to my advantage. And I loved that. I loved that. And it was like, so often I've gone to these meetings and auditions where I've had to kind of, bury that part of my history so that I could be
the normal guy,
credible,
the everyday guy.
As whatever these roles are. But I've never been asked to play somebody that was going to really draw on what my actual heritage was, and And so there's that. Then the weirdest thing happened where the day I got this job offer, my brother is like, he's actually been even more kind of obsessed by like our Italian heritage than I have, and we both spent a lot of time in Sardinia where our cousins are from and stuff, but he like learned to speak Italian fluently. I speak it all right, but he speaks it really, really, really well. And he got like, when I told him that I was going through this whole screen testing process for this movie and everything, he got really excited about it, and he started binge watching The Sopranos again, and he was calling me up every day saying, "Man, this is like better than I remembered it. Like, this is great stuff, And I was like, "I know, I've been watching it again. It's incredible." And so then the day I got this job, I get this text from him saying, "Call me," and there's like exclamation point. So I call him up, and he's like, "You're not going to believe this." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Okay, so, just a little backstory. My grandfather was a sculptor." And they came here in the 40s during the war, and he ended up becoming very successful sculptor. Was part of this like abstract expressionist group of Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning and all of them. And he obviously he wasn't famous on that level or anything, but he was part of that community and knew all those guys. And he has a museum of his work in Sardinia, in his hometown, and sometimes there are exhibitions around Italy and stuff. And so he calls me up. He says, "You're not going to believe this. I'm watching season 2, episode 4 of The Sopranos. And it's an episode where Gandolfini and company go back to Naples to do some business dealing there or whatever. And there's this whole great thing running through the Sopranos of this like total obsession with the homeland and everything, and wanting to get back to your roots and all this kind of thing. And then they get there, and it's just the most alien place they've ever seen, and like it doesn't seem at all what they imagine it to be, and nobody thinks that they're Italian at all, which is exactly what my experience has been, by the way, going home. Like growing up, I was always like, I never felt like really like American. I always felt like, well, yeah, I'm kind of American, but I'm Italian, and I don't know, I don't fit in totally and everything. And then I go back, I finally started going there a lot and visiting my cousins, and they were all like, I was the most American person they have ever seen, I was like just like a cliche of an American, like laughably American. Yeah. And this was what this episode was all about. But there's this scene where Tony Soprano is they shot this whole sequence down in these kind of like underground kind of catacomb tombs or whatever. And my brother's watching this thing, and suddenly in the background of a shot with Gandolfini, some scene he's doing, and it's like a close-up on him, and right in the background behind him, I'm going to show you the picture. I know nobody can see it, but is one of my granddad's sculptures. No way. Like prominently featured right in the back of this shot. And then there's like a whole push-in on this sculpture where so this is here. That's the shot. Wow. That's his sculpture. And then look,
so
that's
weird
that's it without you.
It's like framed in a way that they wanted that to be.
He was obviously David, and it turns out Van Patten shot this episode. Okay, so who's like now one of my good buddies, and he lives right next door. And
he didn't know, obviously.
He didn't know it was my. He still didn't know, even after I was cast in the thing, which was like a great coincidence to begin with, given that he lives next door. He didn't know that this. That this thing that he had shot and obviously featured prominently in the episode because he obviously thought it was beautiful, and that's one of his sculptures right there. You can see the resemblance.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he.
But what is the reason in the show that they did that? Do you know?
No, he just loved the location. Wow. And there just happened to be an exhibition of my grandfather's stuff in this location there, and
so weird.
And they. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, it made me want to cry.
And that was the day that you then got the job.
I had just gotten the job.
Wow. There's so many weird things like that with actors and that I've been learning about.
I know.
This mystical stuff, connections
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, are you a mystical person at all? Like, do you connect with things like this that are not?
The older I get, the more humble I am in front of what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. No like miracle, no supernatural event would surprise me.
Yeah.
I'm also a great believer in science. I really think that there's just so much that is unexplained, and I have no arrogance at all about thinking that, what I think might be true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Alessandro Nivola. Thank you, man.
Hey,
I really appreciate this.
I like you. You didn't say Alejandro or Alexandrio. It's a rare occasion when somebody can say it right.
They're gonna say it a lot more now, man. Thank you, man.
Thanks.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. It's produced by Spencer Rain. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.